Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I'm your host, per usual. Uh, what do we got on the agenda this evening? Last night, the UFC was back in the warehouse. Can I just, for a moment? So, around the same time, um, maybe I'll save it. Maybe I'll save it. Yeah, we were back in the warehouse for UFC on ESPN Plus 99. It was a card. Wasn't very good on paper. Was not all that compelling in practice. I think the only fight on this card that I kind of was like, hey, There was one I was curious about, but not terribly interested in, if that makes sense, because Adrian Yanez wanted to see how he was going to do after the two-fight losing streak. Granted, his losing streak was against very good guys, but wanted to see him rebound. And the main event was good on paper, and it turned out to be pretty good in practice. The rest of this, just no. It was not very good and on paper, and it turned out to not be all that good in practice either. But we'll go through it. The UFC is taking a week off, so there's no event before. Then next week will be UFC 302. So what else we can talk about? Well, we'll talk a little boxing because Usyk and Fury happened, and can I be? I'll be honest. Um, that fight started around the same time the main card started for this event, and I can't tell you how much it was getting going through that period of time. Can't tell you how much I didn't care about Angela Hill and Luana Pinheiro, and was more watching Usyk and Fury because that fight. We'll talk about it. We'll talk a little bit about that one. You've then some other news. There was a little bit, again, a little bit. So we'll talk about all that. So anything you can do to interact with the product, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, whatever's applicable to your podcast platform of choice. Share us around if you've done any and all of that, or if you don't want to do that and just want to share, or if you don't want to do any of that and just want to listen. I'm just glad you're here and listening. I don't. I say the other stuff because it's what you're supposed to say. It's not that I don't mean it. I don't mean it like that. It's just the fact that I have an audience at all is humbling. And the other stuff, trying to grow and whatnot. Yes, I'd like to grow this. I really would, and that does help. But if none of that was available, or even though you choose not to do that, whatever. Just the fact that you listen means more than the rest of it. The rest of it is great, and I always deeply appreciate it. But just being here and listening at all is, again, it is humbling to me. So thank you all very much. All right, with all that out of the way, let's get into this, shall we? So UFC on ESPN Plus 99. Um, Again, back at the UFC warehouse, the Apex. How do we do? We start with this, right? So overall, 8-4. Um, I'll take a 2-to-1 ratio in general. One of these bothered me. Which of these that I got wrong really annoyed me? The DQ one, like, I picked the better fighter. Um, the better fighter was winning and then got disqualified. And I don't even think that's the wrong call, by the way. That's annoying to me. But it annoys me because it messed up my thing. But the DQ was. I thought the ref made the right call. I can't say it any way other than that. We'll get to that fight when we get to it. So that one, again, it annoyed me. Demopoulos and Ducote, I went back and forth on that one last week. I scored that for Ducote, but all three rounds were close. Um, So I can't get mad at any score for either of them. I knew I was taking a flyer on Alves over Abus. What was the other one? Because, hang on, so Demopoulos, DQ, Abus. See, what I got wrong? Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not mad about uh, our co-main event, Williams and Harris. Not going to be mad about that one, getting that one wrong. The odds makers were right, and I wasn't, but you know, I'll stand by that. I'll stand by my pick, even though I got it wrong. Like I'm not beating myself up over that one or anything like that. So again, 8-4, um, solid, solid performance. On the year, that brings me to 142 and 68 with 3 no contests. Again, I'm doing okay. I am doing okay. I'm not blowing. I don't. Again, this is the first time I'm doing this, so I don't actually even have a baseline of how this should be going. I'm just happy to be clearing 500, right? If I'm better than a coin flip, I'm over the moon. That simple. All right. As for the fights themselves, main event, your fight of the night, deservedly so. Lerone Murphy defeats Edson Barboza via unanimous decision, 2 50-45s and a 49-46. You could have given Barboza the first. He was doing okay. I thought he was losing that round. Not huge, but losing it. Then, right at the end, he winds up on his back, and he hits Murphy with a really nasty up kick that hurts Murphy. And if more time had been allotted, the fact that it didn't look as devastating as it probably was, and we cut to commercial very quickly. Commentary then had to say, boy, he was really rocked going back to his stool. You could have given Barboza that first round, and I would not complain one iota. But after that, Murphy's game just really came alive. He dealt with some nasty leg kicks. In fact, when it was all said and done, he was limping pretty badly getting out of the ring. So many fighters, when they get to those steps they have to take to get down, because the octagon is, of course, raised, like sat down, scooted over, put his feet all the way down on the ground because you couldn't take the steps. That's not uncommon. The camera doesn't always show it, but that's not an uncommon thing for fighters. He took those kicks for a while, and then I think it was in the third round he started playing more southpaw to hide it. But those were pretty nasty. His jab gave Barboza problems. Really good jab. Couldn't quite string together combinations too reliably. A lot of that was Barboza's movement. And throwing combinations while you're in motion, trying to cut somebody off as they're moving is difficult. Not impossible, but very difficult, and especially against someone prone to moving, then planting and countering very hard, it's not the best idea to come in with your defense open because you're striking. I understand some of that. Good clinch work. He was able to get the back of Barboza pretty consistently in the clinch, landed knees to the thigh, started throwing elbows on the break. Just really good stuff out of Lerone Murphy. Um, to the point where Barboza's corner probably should have stopped this after the fourth. He was never hurt enough for a big I never thought the referee should have been intervening. Anytime it got to the point where you're like, yeah, maybe Barboza would do enough to prevent the ref from getting involved. There were still a couple of points when you could have done a mercy stoppage, but again, that's there would have been a lot of complaining. Unfairly in some respects, but there would have been a lot of complaining. Barboza's corner, on the other hand, like after those first 4 rounds, I don't know what good sending him out there for the fifth did. Your guy was beat. It happens. You should have saved him the head trauma. He took a lot of head shots. Again, some of these were jabs. Not that a good, strong jab isn't you know, a serious blow to the head. It is. But he took a lot of headshots here. This the corner should have maybe saved him. He didn't need those last 5 minutes of physical abuse. Um, Barboza really, I hate to say he's starting to look shop worn, but because it feels so, insulting. But man, I throw a lot of respect to Barboza. For those of you who may have forgotten this, Edson Barboza's UFC debut was in 2010, November of 2010, but man's been here 13 and a half years. That's a ridiculous stretch of time to be in the UFC. You very rarely have guys stick around that long. And he's still competitive. I certainly don't mean to imply that he's out there just, being a heavy bag. But you can see the trend is starting to go in that direction. And I never like seeing that. Um, I mean, he was hurt badly against Sadiq Yusuff his last time out. He's still turning in good fights. This was fight of the night, and it was a little too one-sided for me to, put it on like fight of the year nominees. But was this the best fight of last night? Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm glad they got paid that. I mean, MMA fighters, especially UFC fighters, are perpetually underpaid. So yeah. Uh, but I don't know how much longer he's gonna stick around. I mean, he took a decent amount of time off after the Yusuf fight because that was a war. And fair play, man. If you need time to recover, take it. That was October of last year, so he was out of rotation for a good like 6 months. Um, might need some more of that after this. Uh, this was just a pretty significant beating, especially over 5 rounds. And again, especially the last round, I don't think was necessary for anybody. Good win for Murphy. Murphy's undefeated. He's been flying under the radar a little bit. This is a guy who's again undefeated, 14-0-1. His UFC debut was a split draw with Zubaira Tukhugov that you could really argue he should have won. Um, not really looked back since. Couple of stoppage wins. He's had some tough fights along the way, but was technically, I think it was like 14 coming into this. A very quiet 14. Not a lot of people talking about Lerone Murphy. You should be talking about him after this. Beating Edson Barboza, even at this stage of his career, Barboza has been a very difficult hurdle for guys to clear. Sadiq Yusuff, we just talked about, couldn't get it done. Billy Quarantillo couldn't put him away. You get this done against Barboza like this, that is a very good indicator of your upside. After the fight, Murphy said, I'm going to change my name. Apparently, earlier in his career, he was known as the Iceman. He started going by the Miracle for a while, and he wants to go back because, nothing about what he does is miraculous. It's hard work. They call him that because, like, he survived getting hit by a car and shot 3 times. It's a wild life story. I don't know how the UFC is going to feel about that one. They tend to reserve the Iceman as the nickname only for Saint Iceman Chuck Liddell. But new management, new overseers might feel a little bit differently. But really good performance out of Murphy. Smart clinching, just a smart fight all the way around. Dealt with some adversity, but persevered. He's going to be due some top featherweights, and featherweight's a weird division. It's had very good champions, but they've been so good, it's kind of stifled turnover in some respects. Max was on top for a while, and he, killed off a whole rising crop of guys. Then you had Volk, who, again, beat a lot of guys, including Max 3 times. And then it's just been really hard for the rising talent at featherweight to break through. Brian Ortega's still kind of sitting there. Yair Rodriguez has been occupying a spot near the top for a while. Um, it took Ilya Taporia made a concentrated effort to break through. I mean, plenty of guys would even get by Josh Emmett. I don't mean to say that like it's some knock on Josh Emmett. He's an older guy for the weight class, but he's a tough out, and he's beaten a lot of guys that were on their way up. There's just a really good still class of guys who are hanging on in this weight class. So it's been hard for people to really make noise, really get momentum. And Murphy's starting to get there. So very good performance from him, very good win. Uh, he's going to be due a bigger fight next, and definitely has a really good upside. The rest of this card, I'm not nearly as interested in. Chaos Williams defeated Carlston Harris via knockout. Caught him with the right hand, 130 of the first. Little bit back and forth before that. You can see Harris a little bit more the technical striker, but his defense left a little bit to be desired, and Williams hits really hard. And that's not to say that Williams is not a good fighter, but he doesn't lean on technique so much as setups. Because if you look at a lot of his punches, just the mechanics are a little bit weird. He generates more than enough power. Like some guys just punch a little bit weird looking mechanically because it's how they generate maximum force. And if you can make it land, like, it's all about the delivery system. You can hit as hard as anyone has ever hit in the world, but if you can't get your weapon to the target, it doesn't matter. The delivery system is everything. And Williams, he's still figuring that out. He seemed to get he's been getting better about it. So it's one of the reasons I don't harp on his mechanics too much. He got a good, setup here and landed a good right hand. Fair play to him. Good win. Temba Garimbo and Ramiz Brahimaj. This fight sucked. Oi. Most of it was clinching. Garimbo, I think Brahimaj expected to have more of an advantage there than he did, but Garimbo was the better clincher. Brahimaj, he kept trying. He kept getting caught halfway between trying an inside trip or an inside reap and a front Uchimata. And every time he tried it, he got countered, and Garimbo wound up on top, and you can't really, I hate to say you can't do the inside trip or the inside reap against the fence, because you can, it's just trickier. Normally when you do this, one of your legs goes between the opponents, hooks the inside of the leg on the same side. So if my left is going between, and I'm executing the technique, I'm going to hook inside of your right and then just push you backwards. If you want to see someone who's really good at this, Henry Cejudo, one of the best inside trips MMA's ever seen. One of the best inside trips even like amateur wrestling's seen. Daniel Cormier does this all the time. He does it off of a single leg instead of an upper body clinch, but he will hit it from there too. Both those guys, again, that's how you do that technique. If you don't have space behind you, so if you're against the fence, it winds up meaning you wind up having to twist. So Daniel Cormier talks about this all the time when guys are trying to do this improperly against the fence. One of the few times his commentary is tolerable when he's talking about something which he knows about. You reap inside, hook, and then you have to pivot. So again, you have that leg that they would be posting on swept and entangled, so then they tip that direction. Very basic. But a lot of guys don't do it properly. And a lot of guys have good defense about it, so even trying to do it properly, it comes down to timing and some very specific execution issues. And some guys try to do it, try to hook the leg on the same side that they have the underhook, which you can still do, but you generally want to go to the other side, because when you have the side that you're underhooking on, you then crank that up, get under the armpit, under that wedge there, to help you lever them, whereas on the other side, you almost go towards more of a headlock, and that's not good, because then you give up your back, and the minutia of fence wrestling. There's some great series on it. Khabib has a great series on it. Gordon Ryan has a good series on it. Was it Gordon Ryan? I don't know if James Krause's one is still available. It should be. It was James Krause. Great series on fence wrestling. Again, I want to say it's either Gordon Ryan or Craig Jones, and forgive me, I can't remember off the top of my head. One of those two guys has a good series on fence wrestling or wall wrestling. Look all that stuff up. You'll be better off for it. Um, but moving on from that, the other one he gets again. He's like trying to do the foot position for that, but then do a front Uchimata. If you want to see a front Uchimata, Islam Makhachev has maybe the best one in MMA. Front Uchimata is getting one leg between your opponents. Then you have to lift with your upper body, and as you spin them backwards, you use that leg between them to help hip heist. And if you're listening to me going, wait, your terminology's off, please. Again, I don't want to get bogged down in the minutia of terminology because you know what I'm saying, even if I'm using slightly different words. So as long as the point's being conveyed, please don't get too militant about that. Because believe me, I know a lot of martial arts guys get super militant about terminology when if you know what I'm describing and I'm just using a slightly different word, let's just go with it. And again, that's the whole thing. But then you use that to help hike that hip up so they can't base on that. And then even if they get the leg the direction they're going down to the mat, everything else is off balance enough, and you've kind of hiked that up to tip them off axis, and they'll go over. Watch Islam Makhachev, great at it. Absolutely great. Khabib had a pretty good one when he was still around too, but Makhachev, I think, has a really excellent one. But you can't do that hooking at the knee or even lower at the ankle, because then if you hook that, try to spin backwards, you're going to get just sat on, basically. And Garimbo did that over and over. Really poor execution from Brahima in those spots. This fight sucked, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because there's some technique there worth discussing. Adrian Yanez knocked out Vinicius Salvador, 247 of the first round. Just a really nice counter, right? Had kind of he'd been trying to set one up for a while, but the range was a little off. He finally figured that out. Threw a left hook. Salvador then threw, I think it was a leg kick. And because he's on one leg and can't move, the Yanez counter right just crushed him. Still have a pretty good feeling about the upside of Yanez. Couple of tough losses, but hopefully he's learned the appropriate lessons from those. And we'll see what he does going forward. But much needed win for him, and he delivered in spades. And kicking off the main card, Angela Hill beat Luana Pinheiro with a guillotine choke, 4:12 of the second. Pinheiro just never really felt like she was in this. This was Hill's first finish since like 2020. I think only like her second or third her entire UFC career. First submission win of her professional career, so, good for her. She's enjoying a bit of a renaissance late in her career. She's almost 40. I don't know, which I just say, like, I don't know exactly how far this goes, but, I'm not exactly a fan of Angela Hill, but, I'm not going to sit here and poo-poo her accomplishments. She got a, pretty solid win here. I mentioned already, like, this fight was running, unfortunately, at kind of the same time as a decent chunk of the Fury Usyk fight, and that was so much more interesting. On the prelims, Tom Nolan got back on the winning side of things, TKOing Victor Martinez. Really nice knee to the body. He got hurt not too long before that, though. Got some defensive issues. He's a big guy for lightweight, very long, very tall. But that leads to a lot of tall man defense. And tall man defense is a lot of leaning, which you can get away with when you're taller, but when the range starts to fall apart or the footwork isn't quite there or the positioning, it leaves you open to being clobbered, and he got clocked. He recovered, which, good work from him in that respect. Got up. He'd been showing the stepping knee to the body because he was southpaw. The other guy, Martinez, was orthodox. And anytime Martinez is trying to crash distance, just bring that knee up straight into the breadbasket. Caught him with a swiping one across the liver, folded him up. yeah, Tom Nolan needed a win. He had a lot of hype coming into his UFC debut, and then he fumbled. Shouldn't say he fumbled that. Like the other guy wasn't doing well when he beat him, but stumbled certainly. Got back on track here. Good for him. Omar C defeated Tuco Tacos via rear naked choke. It's listed here as a face crank. It's not a face crank. Ugh. Um, don't want to yell about this. No, it's not worth yelling about. But there's a school of thought that I guess anything that isn't the arm expressly under the chin and under the jaw around the neck is now a face crank. A face crank requires torque. It's rotational. A face crank is rotational pain. It attacks the neck, right? You get your arm across their face and you just crank in one direction. And if you're really mean and nasty, you get like the bone of your forearm. If you do this for like no gi, for even gi grappling, like if you just grapple like no gloves, just like getting either your thumb or the inside of your wrist, like that real bony part of your arm right there, and just getting it across the bridge of the nose and just yanking straight back. Don't do that when you're training, by the way. That's a really, like, when I say dirty, I don't mean illegal. I mean like nasty, grimy thing to do. Don't do that to your training partners. If you're in a competition, go for it, and thank me later if the other guy doesn't know it's coming, because that hurts so much. But if you're doing it constantly to the guys you roll with, like no one's gonna want to roll with you. Is the long and the short of that. So if you're gonna drill it and like try to practice it, let them know that's what you're doing, but don't do it live very often. It's just again, competition. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want within the rules. But training, like observe some etiquette and respect for your partners, please. But that, or again, you get across the face and then you rotate it one side or the other. That's a face crank. The arm being across the lower jaw, you're still compressing the carotid arteries. You're just not getting under the jaw, so you're not doing it with your arm. You're just squeezing and pulling their own jaw backwards into the blood vessels, because you can do that. That's what makes it a rear naked choke, not a face crank, my opinion. Tokos was a late replacement. This was supposed to be C, and a few different guys actually fell out of this fight. Initially, it was Adolfo Bellato. That got changed to Antonio Trocoli. Eventually, we settled on Tokos, and yeah, C just much better grappler. It's light heavyweight, so who knows? Women's bantamweight Melissa Gatto defeated Tamiris Vidal 37 seconds in the third round with a punch to the body. Gatto was winning this fight anyway. But start of the third round, she lands a jab to the chest. And Vidal must have just caught her wrong. Vidal immediately like grabbed at her chest, turned, and it's like, no, we're done. And then Gatto, because the referee hadn't intervened yet, stepped in and just kept swinging. And she stopped as soon as the ref was like, okay, we're done. Yeah, that's a legal blow. Low blows in female fights, against the rules. But pardon the potential crudeness of the expression, punching the boob is legal. And Vidal must have just got caught just a little bit off with Gatto's jab. And again, it's legal, so solid enough win for Gatto. Middleweights, Abus Magomedov. Commentary. You knew this was cursed when commentary was like, yeah, neither of these guys are known for seeing the judges. Like, okay, so you tell me we're going the distance. Abus Magomedov defeated Warley Alves via unanimous decision, 30-26 across the boards. I think the second round was the 10-8. Just, dealt with Warley's swinging power punches, got him down, rode him, pounded on him. Like, just nothing special. Strawweight, okay, here we go. Ariane Carnelose defeated Piero Rodriguez via disqualification. Rodriguez is winning this fight. She's moving pretty well. She's landing better combinations. She drops Carnelose, gets on top, and as she's in the full guard, and the first time she's trying for head position, she's slightly postured up and looks to go down, and establish head position, get the head under the chin. And her head kind of bangs into Colonel Usky, and the referee gets in there and says, hey, watch the headbutts, like the referee should do. The first time it happened, it looked a little incidental. Like we're just trying and get a little aggressive with your head position. The referee says, watch it, like he should. She looks up to look at the ref, like stops fighting for head position because the referee says something. She pauses, looks up, tries to assess, and then just drops her head back down in what looks very much like an intentional headbutt. Catches Colonel Usky in kind of the nose and face. Referee stops things, separates them. Colonel Usky ultimately can't continue, and Rodriguez is disqualified. Rodriguez was winning this fight rather handily, but you can't headbutt people. Headbutts are one of those things that, if I'm being honest, there's a handful of things that used to be legal in MMA back in like the real early days, the Wild West, that were deemed illegal and ruled out of the sport for good reasons, some of them. Like no eye gouging, okay. Like so everyone understands this. Part of the problem with one of the reasons we don't allow eye gouging, it's not because strikes to the or pokes to the eye stop a fight. It's because they don't. It's because you will accrue life-altering damage very quickly but the fight won't stop, and it'll just keep happening. That's the reason for it. If you've ever seen fights where it is more legal, a lot of the stuff that guys currently take timeouts for, they just don't, and their vision just gets really messed up. There's a reason they don't. Headbutts are one of those things that are just looked at as barbaric. And because, you're using your head where your brain is as a weapon, you're just really maximizing the kind of trauma that you should be trying to minimize. That's the theory. Headbutts are one of those things I would be personally curious to watch modern MMA if that was allowed. Because there's a bunch of stuff that would change to allow for that. It's the same reason I'd like to see more, allow knees to the head of a downed opponent. Or at a minimum, if both fighters are downed, allow kicks and knees to the head. It would change guard if you could up kick to the face from both guys being downed. It would radically alter how side control is used in particular. To say nothing of like north-south or a front headlock or top sprawl position. That becomes a weaponized position very, very quickly if you can knee the head. Now, again, I would like to see that because I also think, and the evidence tends to bear this out, it's not nearly as catastrophic or world-altering as the hand-wringers like to be. If you want to ban like soccer kicks still, okay. But I mean, even in Pride where they were legal, like they didn't stop many fights. And most of the time, by the time soccer kicks are landing and the fight is stopped, the fight should have been stopped earlier. There were a lot of late stoppages in Pride. We don't talk about that a lot. And don't get me wrong, love Pride, personally. Like some of the best fights you'll ever see came out of that organization. Some of the best fighters. Nothing but respect. But there was a lot of brutality. And there were a lot of fights that went on longer than they should have. That shouldn't be a controversial sentiment to anyone who watched it. So that's kind of why soccer kicks I don't think are as big a deal. If referees were better about stopping fights, they would almost never come into play because by the time they're relevant, the fight should already be ending. But that's a different discussion. Rodriguez but again, headbutts are one of those I would be curious to see modern MMA with headbutts. Maybe because I'm you can call me a barbarian if you like. I'd be curious to watch modern MMA with low blows legalized. Now, low blows are the same thing as eye gouges. Like, you, the problem isn't that they stop fights, it's that they tend not to, and there's a disproportionate amount of damage accrued. But, like I said, I'd be curious. Because, again, I'm weird, but how does that change the kickboxing stances? Because a lot of MMA these days is kickboxing. It changes ground and pound. I guarantee you that. There's a handful of positions that are radically different. And I'd be curious to see it because I know everyone would adjust. It's not like, again, if you legalize knees to the head of a downed opponent, all the positions where guys are spending time because they can't get kneed in the head, they stop spending time there. They're not just going to hang out there knowing full well that they can legally be kneed in the head. It changes things. The game changes. Um, Josh Barnett talked about this on, I think, an interview with Ariel Helwani not that long ago, that the current MMA rule set has basically been figured out. Like, when was the last time something new came out of MMA? You could argue like the calf kick, which is a thing that kickboxing had figured out a long time ago and stopped using because of the propensity for leg breaks on checks, which we've seen some in MMA. Now, it's persisted in MMA because the MMA stance and the considerations are different and doesn't allow for quite as easy a time dealing with it. There are still guys who are expert at dealing with the calf kick. Watch any Jose Aldo fight. That man knows how to shut down leg kicks like nobody's business. But again, the current MMA rule set basically has been figured out. It's been gamified. I mean, it's all a game. It's all gamified in the sense that it is rules constraints on a sporting event. But people talking about trying to game the system. The MMA system has been gamed. Again, figured out. Scoring criteria basically figured out. How best to go about your business there. It's been figured out. Um, which is not always the end of the world, but it does need to be acknowledged. Hoist Gracie was on the Joe Rogan podcast recently, and Hoist was like, I want a 15-minute round with no stand-ups because he's still slightly under the delusion that that is the best thing for... Look, man, no one is more grateful. A real martial artist should be incredibly grateful to the Gracie family. Because at a time period when 90% of people were talk and no hat, the Gracies put their money where their mouth was, said, bring your style, let's figure this out. And of course they only did this because they thought they were the best and they were selective. I mean, one of the disgusting stories that comes out of that is, the Gracie challenge that was won by a catch wrestler, and then he got jumped by a couple of them, leaving the dojo. Again, disgusting stuff. So they were a little selective about that, but you didn't see a lot of other traditional martial artists doing that kind of stuff. They said, hey, let's figure this out, and they changed the martial art world. And I'm incredibly grateful to them for that, and any real martial artist should be. You should be aware of your weaknesses, you should be aware of what's out there, and you should try to make allowances for that. A lot of people are still bitter about it, but, what are you going to do? But, no, here's the thing. If you did that, if you did one 15-minute round with no stand-ups, no one would watch. MMA is not designed to be the closest representation to a real fight that you can get. It's designed to be fighting under a rule set. Nobody would watch if it was 15-minute round with no stand-ups, no one would watch. Almost no one would watch. I mean, there's some of us that would, but you'd kill it. You'd kill the viewer interest in the sport. You'd kill it dead. And he thinks that part of the advocacy for this is that's the best way to integrate jiu-jitsu into all of this. Ignoring how many jiu-jitsu guys would just get held down, and this would be a regression. It would regress to the top game being the most dominant thing. because there was no way for the referee to intervene and save the viewers. I am I would be interested in a longer first round. The 10-minute first round from Pride I actually liked. Let fights develop a little bit more in some respects. Boxing fights develop over a longer period of time because more rounds but shorter rounds, and you get these narratives and swings of momentum, and it creates magic that because of some of what happened in the Fury and Usyk fight. Somebody mentioned like a fairly prominent like combat sports Twitter account. Like I love MMA, but it doesn't give us moments like this when you and it's Fury or excuse me, it's Usyk when he badly hurts Fury in the ninth and like knocks him around the ring a little bit before the and he got some flack for this. People going like, man, not that long ago we had Holloway and Gaethje's final moments, brilliant moment. Or Leon Edwards head kicking Kamaru Usman in the fifth round of that fight to win the title, also great moment. But one, those are infrequent in MMA. They're not impossible to find, but they're infrequent, and you usually only find them in 5-round fights. Not that there's no magic in 3-round fights. There are some great 3-round fights. Seriously. But the magic of boxing is not replicable in MMA because of the structure. Because even 5-minute rounds, like that's 25 minutes. That's a decent chunk of time. But a 12-round boxing fight is longer by, again, like 6 minutes. And the rapidity of the rounds forces different things. And again, over a longer period of time, you get narratives and you get soaring, triumphant moments that, again, it's not that you don't find them in MMA. I generally prefer MMA to boxing. But it is also true that high-level magical boxing surpasses magical MMA. If you've never seen like the magical fights in boxing, MMA doesn't really have their equivalents. You can try to find it. Look, and this one bothered me, but like after the first fight between Dan Henderson and Shogun Rua, Dana White was like, "That's our." Did he liken it to the Rumble in the Jungle, or Ali Frazier? I forget which one, but there was some very famous boxing fight. There's a lot of them, but I can't remember which one in particular. He said, "This is our whatever." And I love that fight. I really do, but it wasn't what he compared it to. Um, there's just something special about the way boxing is structured that when the right people come together, it is a magic that MMA just, for whatever reason, can't quite duplicate. Now, MMA is my opinion. In general, MMA is going to be better. I mean, there was a world title fight last night. It wasn't the Fury Usyk one. It was like Navarrete and Baranchyk that was not very good. And Barboza and Murphy was a better fight than Navarrete and Baranchyk, just straight up. But I don't know that we're gonna get a fight on the MMA side of things all year that's going to wind up being better than Fury Usyk. Because again, that was magic. There've been some other, and there's other, great moments in boxing. I'm not trying to belabor the point here. I'm just saying, I do wonder if the 10-minute first round might be something that should be explored. And also for MMA, scoring the fight as a whole is better than scoring it round over round. You'd have to figure out a way to make point deductions play into that if you're gonna, because that's the method by which the referees enforce the rules, right? I mean, it's part of the reason Pride did, purse penalties, which MMA fighters just paid poorly enough. I wouldn't feel good about introducing that into MMA right now. If they were paid appropriately, we could talk. As it stands, though, like 10% of their purse, like some of these guys are fighting for 12 and 12. That's just that's punitive in a way that feels malicious. So you'd have to find some way to figure that out in a different, in kind of a different method. I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but I do think scoring the fight as a whole is a better representation of MMA than round over round. I actually don't feel that way about boxing. Boxing round by round, because there's more rounds, is the correct way to do it, I think. But anyway, that's a long way around to go to, especially because Piero Rodriguez like got real bitter about this ruling and like, okay, I hope you enjoy my money, you thief. Hey, lady, don't headbutt. It's not hard not to headbutt somebody, especially in the position you were in. You did this to yourself. Like, don't get bitter at your opponent for not being able to continue after you blatantly fouled them. Let's see, moving on. Bantamweight, Alatong Hele defeated Clegerson Rodriguez, 30-27, twice in a 29-28. Pretty solid performance from Alatong Hele here all the way around. And kicking everything off, Vanessa Demopoulos defeated Emily Ducote via split decision, 29-28. Again, this was close. All three rounds were close. These two women threw down a little bit. I think there was some weird stat, like the next 4 fights combined had fewer strikes thrown than these two did. So they were willing to get after it, so I give them credit for that. Again, I scored it for Ducote, but I'm not mad either way. Like, it's a pretty decent overall fight. Probably the second best fight of the night, in all honesty. So that was it. Your bonuses, again, fight of the night I already mentioned was Lerone Murphy and Edson Barboza, fully deserved. Performances went to Chaos Williams and Angela Hill. Finishes were at a premium here. I would have gone Yanez instead of Hill personally, but that's kind of splitting hairs. Yeah, that was the event. Again, not great on paper, not all that great in practice. Main event's worth watching. The rest, I'm putting Garimbo and Brahima on my list of worst fights all year. I was debating that for a little bit. I just decided, like, that's where that's going. That's what that deserves. It was not a good fight. So, yeah, UFC, full report, MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Y'all know where to find me over there. Give it a read if you're so inclined. I always appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, I've talked a little bit about it already. Let me dive slightly more detail into the fight for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world on the boxing side of things. First undisputed champion of the 4-belt era. First fully undisputed champion in since, when was the last one? I think it involved Lennox Lewis. Because for a while the titles got broken up and then just it was a real struggle to actually get them all together again. It's been a while. It's been quite a while since we've had full-on undisputed. And technically, Usyk is now the lineal heavyweight champion of the world as well. Good for him, because Fury had that distinction. Alexander Usyk defeats Tyson Fury, split decision. I don't get the split for Tyson. I think the best Tyson Fury could have hoped for was a draw here, especially after the knockdown in the 9th. But watch this fight. This is great boxing. Starts the way of Usyk. He's the smaller man, but he's got fast hands. He's got really good technique, able to get inside, able to land some punches. Fury starts to figure things out around the 3rd, 4th round, though. He starts landing a really nice uppercut. He goes to the body a lot. He just kind of starts breaking Usyk down a little bit. Goes that way for a few rounds. He's moving well. He's jabbing a bit more. He's starting to smother Usyk when Usyk gets close. And again, he's hitting him to the body, catching him with an uppercut. Usyk, to his credit, is a very good fighter and figures something out. He starts changing his entries a little bit and just catches Fury, throwing back at him in close, and in the ninth, clobbers him with a left hand. Rocks him back into the ropes, has him on skates, chases him around the ring, eventually gets a knockdown. Ruled a knockdown, Fury kind of falls into the corner, but you can't be saved from a knockdown by the ropes or something, so if it looks like you can bounce off them if your feet are under you, but if it looks like you're falling, you kind of go into them, that's ruled a knockdown, so refs, they could have stopped this. It would not have been out of line for the referee to have waved this off in the ninth. Now, Fury's ability to recover after taking damage is the stuff of legend, because he was badly hurt here. Again, could have been stopped. Reconstitutes himself, gets back to work fairly quickly. Still loses the next couple of rounds, and then unfortunately kind of gives away the 12th. Usyk just able to again get back to work. But this was a really good fight. There was already an automatic rematch clause in place for both guys, no matter who won. They're looking for October for that. But right now, Alexander Usyk, undisputed, 4-belt and lineal heavyweight champion of the world. He'll have that for like the week, because the IBF is going to strip recognition of that title, again, at the end of the week, basically. Which is stupid, but boxing's kind of stupid sometimes. Alexander Usyk is an all-time great in the sport of boxing. Olympic gold medalist, once or twice. At least once. I know Lomachenko was twice. But Olympic gold medalist at heavyweight, because the Olympics have super heavyweight, comes to cruiserweight, becomes just the second undisputed cruiserweight champion ever. Only him and Evander Holyfield have done that. And he beat a great group of cruiserweights to do that. Moves up to heavyweight and beats Anthony Joshua twice. Now beats Tyson Fury to hold all the gold. He is he is one of the best to ever do it in boxing. And he's a boxing marvel. He is one of the 3 best fighters in the world right now in boxing. The 3 best boxers in the world, for the record. I don't know which order you place these 3 gentlemen in. That's up to you. But for me, I'm going to list them, and this is not the order I have them. This is just alphabetical. Bud Crawford, Naoya Inoue, Alexander Usyk. Those are the 3 best boxers in the world, and for anyone out there going, what about Canelo? Look, Canelo's a legend. He's been the face of boxing in some respects, and certainly was for a while. Not saying anything bad about Canelo, but right now, he's not the top of the heap. Those 3 guys. And even if you're an MMA fan, watch those 3 guys in particular, and you can thank me later, because they are incredible. And this was a great performance from Usyk, who had to overcome he got rocked in, I think it was the 7th. He got hit with an uppercut that really kind of rang his bell. And again, he was getting torched to the body. Part of why he got back into this was Fury stopped going to the body. Again, there's an automatic rematch clause in place. I don't know who that favors, to be honest, because they're both really good, but if Fury can get going earlier on the stuff he figured out here, that's winnable. We might get a trilogy out of these 2, and I, for one, welcome it. That would be great. So this was, again, a great fight. Look it up. Thank me later. Yeah, that was a great fight. And big credit to Alexander Usyk, undisputed cruiserweight, Olympic champion, undisputed heavyweight, lineal heavyweight champion. That guy's done about everything you can do in boxing, and done it at the highest level. So a tip of the cap to him, especially if you didn't see it, like after the fact, he dedicated the win to his father who passed away recently, and then like in the locker room broke down, mentioning how much he missed him. I'm very fortunate that both of my parents are still with us, but my dad's mom passed when I was like 11. And then my mom's dad passed about 10 years ago. Both of those tore me up. Say nothing of them. It's a it is a terrible pain to lose a parent. And I'm fortunate enough to have, not to preach, but the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and the sealing power that takes some of the sting out of that. But even knowing that, it still hurts. I mean, you have to. It has to hurt. Even with a great knowledge of the eternities, it's still painful. And the President Nelson, I think, phrased it the best way possible. The only way to take the sting out of death is to take the love out of life. I'll add my own caveat on the end of that, and who wants to live like that? So, Usyk doing this, still kind of processing and dealing with some of that, personal pain is even more remarkable. And wonderful fight. Absolutely wonderful fight. And, okay, I think the only major piece of news I have here, the UFC dropped the card for UFC 304. Wrong button. There we go. So we now have our main, co-main. This is their return. They're in Manchester, right? They're in England. Yeah, Manchester. So your main event for the welterweight title, Leon Edwards and Belal Muhammad. Look, I understand that no one's really excited about this, but sometimes you have to give the shot to the deserving guy, even if you kind of look at that and go, but I don't like this fight on paper. You have to reward wins. You have to sometimes, and even if it's not a very interesting fight on paper, if the guy has earned it, you have to give him that. Belal Muhammad has earned a shot at the world title. I don't like his chances, and I'm not terribly interested in this fight. But he's earned it, and you have to reward that. He's earned it the kind of way that means if he loses, he's never getting another shot, basically. But the UFC's done that before, and again, I prefer Edwards' chances here. I think he just matches up very well with Belal Muhammad. But Bilal's earned the shot, and he has the chance to prove that he's the best in the world. So we'll see that. Co-main event for the interim heavyweight champion, Tom Aspinall defends that title against Curtis Blades. Okay. If all parties concerned, this is particularly John Jones and the UFC, are going to insist on this John Jones versus Stipe Miocic stupidity. One, if the interim champion won his belt after the champion won his, and then defends it before the champion defends his, I'm sorry, Tom Aspinall is the real champion. Jones and Stipe are going to fight, whatever. I hope they both get paid a lot, because I hope all of my fighters get paid a lot. But that is like a vanity sideshow to what the heavyweight division should be doing, especially because in all probability John's retiring after that. And to be abundantly clear about the following, John Jones is the best fighter in MMA history. I'm only talking about in the cage, and to all the people who do the weirdness about stuff outside the cage messes with how you perceive that, whatever. I'm not arguing with you. I think your criteria is whack, to be perfectly honest. And in the cage, John's the best I've ever seen. And don't get me wrong, I've seen a lot of great fighters. I think John's the best. But he's looking for, a lower risk, bigger payday, and then I think he's looking for the door. And I don't blame him for that. Get out with your health. Seriously. But you are log jamming a division that has a guy that you should be fighting in Tom Aspinall. As for that fight, I like Aspinall's chances there a lot. We'll also have Bobby Green and Paddy Pimblett. Paddy's opened as a betting underdog for this one, which is amusing to me. Arnold Allen and Giga Chikadze. That's actually a pretty good fight. Muhammad Makayev and Manel Kopp. Okay. I'm kind of rooting for Kopp there, because as much as he's like a figure that a lot of people don't like, Makayev annoys me more. which is purely personal, but he does. And it's just a lot of it's his fighting style. Like there's a lot good there, but there's a bunch of it that I just like. Ugh. I've seen this. I've seen a lot of this. I don't need to see more of this. Also on that card, Nathaniel Wood, Daniel Pineda, Molly McCann against a tomato can because they wanted to try and get her back in good graces. And then a few other fights that no one really cares about. But that's the main card, I assume, is the two title fights, Green and Pimblett, Allen and Chikadze, and Makayev and Kopp. That's a solid pay-per-view main card. Um, so hopefully it holds together, and there's room for a few other fights to be announced. They're going to fill out the undercard. Yeah, so I think that's all the major news I have here. Yeah, let me check Twitter, see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Alright, nope, nothing new. So, plugs. Damn You Hollywood this Monday, so probably the day you're listening to this, statistically speaking at least. Mark Radulich and myself will be joined by Chris, I believe, from Movies That Don't Suck and Some That Do. Let me double check that. I want to make sure I get his name right. Yeah, Chris. Okay. We'll be talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So, yeah, I haven't seen it yet. We'll be watching it tomorrow. Tune in for that. Week after is Furiosa. That'll be on a Tuesday, so that'll be fun. Yeah, I think that's it. I didn't have any podcasting last week personally, so yeah, be on the lookout for that. I will be covering WWE SmackDown on Friday, no UFC event on Saturday. I agreed to cover something. Hang on. Sunday, I will be covering AEW's Double or Nothing. So that will also be out before I record this, so yeah, be on the lookout for that. So if you care about any and all of that, the relevant zones, wrestling and MMA at 411mania.com, you can find my work over there. We will be back here next week to preview UFC 302, which is a pretty solid card on paper. Nice, JLT Almeida and Alexander Romanov on the main card. Cesar Almeida and Roman Kopylov should be there instead. Straight up, flat out, those didn't. But other than that, it's not bad. Makhachev and Poirier is very good. I don't hate Strickland and Costa. That could be a very uninteresting fight, but we'll have to see. Holland and Michał Oleksiejczuk I don't hate. Almeida and Romanov is whatever. Yeah. Almeida might be trying to make a run at heavyweight. Romanov, I think we've seen his ceiling. And then, yeah, again, like I'd rather watch Cesar Almeida and Roman Kopylov than those two schlubs. It's not a bad card. What in the world am I supposed to do with that guy's name? Holy crap. Where's that guy? I will look it up next week. I'm going to butcher this guy's name the next week. You can look forward to that. Look forward to me butchering this gentleman's name in the first fight of the night. That'll be fun. All right, that's it for me this week, everybody. Thank you all very much for listening. Appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there, and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.